Welcome to Ryan Runs. I've taken a deep breath. I'm Ryan Miller, taking a deep breath. And I'm not going to bounce or move or hop or twitch for this entire episode. Podcast listeners, I think I don't have any nervous twitches at all, so don't ruin it for them. If you're wondering why I look a little funny, if the color's a little bad, which again, just perfect content for podcast listeners, it's because I normally film this in something that's called S-Log 2. Actually, there's S-Log 3. I don't know if there's S-Log 1, I would imagine, right? And what it lets you do is have greater control over the color and exposure after the fact. So what I will do afterwards, now that I'm editing in DaVinci Resolve, but you can do this in any other editor, I'm sure, to some extent, is I would then add a LUT, L-U-T, which stands for lookup table. More on all of this in a second. And then I most recently discovered an automatic button that I hit, and it makes the color look automatically better. But also I can sit there and futz around with it for a bit if I want, which I don't because I'm not that good at it, which when I say more on this later is because this isn't something I'm very good at or even knew about until probably fairly recently, let's say, relatively speaking, given how long I've been in the video business. In fact, I remember working at my first job and getting some footage from a different source. Sometimes for more important videos, they would outsource to better firms. And every now and then I would get the footage of that after the fact. Most often, I think the job I was working for didn't spring for that because the other thing that'll happen is when you outsource to firms, they typically retain copyright, or there's an extra fee involved if they don't, to the video that they make, even if it's for a commercial for your business or however that goes. So every now and then I would get footage back, and I remember one time getting footage back that was just gray, kind of like it was before, or is now if I change it back real quick. So I sent them an email along the lines of, hey, the footage is all messed up, but they had filmed in, and there's a number, it's called S-Log. What I use is because that's the Sony version. I shoot on an A7S II. So other companies have, I think there's a C-Log for Canon or something like that. Logarithmic, I think, is where the log comes from, so having something to do with color. This is what I'm getting at. I don't know really all of this that I'm talking about. I have only recently begun to kind of experiment with some of it. So that's fun. That's why this video does that, because at some point I was like, hey, this would be a good excuse to mess around with some stuff. Now it pretty much becomes I shoot it in the gray and then I hit the LUT button and then I hit the automatic button and here we go. So that's interesting. And podcast people, just go check out the video. Also, how do you like the new logo? I love it. I've started putting it on things. This is maybe the second thing. I'm moving a little bit more slowly than I would like. So for now, you'll see it on Daily Drum and this video from here on out, the Ryan Runs videos. Once again, thanks to Brandon for the design of that, and any new logos that you see popping up on the site are from him. Funny story about the old logo. The original logo is just me opening up an iPad. I had recently purchased Procreate, I think for Evelyn, because she had recently got an iPad and we wanted her to create. So I opened up that app, drew that logo, first try, and exported it. That's it. I didn't redo anything. That is just the first thing. In fact, I want to say early on, maybe for Ryan Runs 1, 2, or something like that, I had drawn the logo on my hand, which if you've ever, this is interesting. In fact, I could go into detail on this, but I won't. The X logo there is actually me just, again, stealing from my music roots, as I do a lot with this video. And stay tuned, I got one more thing on the wall here. But that's actually a logo that was pretty prolific in the punk scene wherever you went. I guess it started with New York hardcore. There would be the NYHC in the four quadrants. So it was always just something, and I don't know, for maybe a show I put an X on my hand because I was straight edge or however that goes. I don't even think that's related, honestly, but you will see that logo pop up a whole bunch of times around the punk scene. not just in New York. You know, it made its way all over. In fact, the best one I ever saw here on the West Coast was from Lagwagon's NRHC, Not Really Hardcore, which is also funny given the evolution of punk and where it's called hardcore or why it's called hardcore sometimes and stuff like that. So in any event, that's where that logo came from. And while the excuse of having only drawn it once and quickly and that's all isn't really a good enough excuse to keep it around, I still like it. So it might show up here and there. But okay, so the new thing on the wall though, before I start talking about anything else, and you can only see half of it, so some of you have already figured it out and others have no idea, don't care. It's the second studio album from a band called Pennywise. It's the first punk album, punk band I ever had, owned, or listened to. So I saw them fairly recently, I don't remember if it was this year or late last year or something like that, in San Luis Obispo, not far from where I am. Shows started coming back around. In fact, it might have been the first show post-COVID. And they had this sitting on the merch table, which I like to go to. I know the money goes directly to them, so I try and get whatever, there's something at least. And they had this sitting there. It's signed by 3 of them, so I don't know who I'm missing. I can tell Byron. I don't know who the other 2 squigglies are. I'm guessing Jim and Fletcher. But I thought, why not? So I got that, figured it would make a cool thing to have around because it is. It's an album that changed my life. And before maybe I even share that story, what if we go back to all of the albums that I ever had before then? Because I can kind of count them on one hand. And I swear, if you can guess any of these, you deserve some kind of a medal, because I feel like I was all over the place musically. And I would hope most of us are when we start listening to music. I bet most of us don't even remember. That's my curse, is I remember. So the first album, are you ready? Everybody have their guesses filled out? First album I ever had in my possession to listen to was one that I borrowed from Anna Jabe, who I didn't have the hugest crush on ever first, in 1987. And it was Def Leppard's Hysteria, because I had to have Rocket. It was like my favorite song back then. I'm sure it got enough radio play that I heard it or could hear it when I wanted to, but that was the first tape, cassette, album I remember having that I could play on command. So, number 1. Number 2 was MC Hammer's Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em, which was a big deal, which was a fairly transgressive for me at the time. I remember this one I owned, so I must have struck out on my own down to probably Warehouse, right, music. But I say transgressive because I remember my mom coming into my room and making me play it for her because I think she wanted to take it away straight up. And I was like, no, it's fine. Like, I don't get it. But she listened to it. And when, of course, you didn't hear any swear words, because it's like the cleanest rap album you can own, I would imagine, at the time or something. She let me keep it. So that was album number 2. Album number 3, if you guessed any, it was this one. It was the soundtrack to the 1990 also. So that was when MC Hammer came out too. So 1990 was a big year for me. The soundtrack to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, which is a bona fide classic, holds up, is excellent in every regard and should never be changed or not adored. But I had the album and loved all those songs. Ninja Rap wasn't on there. If you remember, that was Secret of the Ooze. So, but just, I mean, it had all the scored music there too, which I just listened to. I mean, it was on cassette, so it's not like I was skipping tracks or anything, but played that album. In fact, busted out my box of cassettes thinking I must still have it, and I don't. So I'd be holding it up right now if I did. Next album I remember is from 1992. And maybe one specific person has guessed this and doesn't know necessarily where it falls. But now we've got, in fact, these next two maybe. But and even funnier that these are the ones that immediately preceded Unknown Road for me. The first was Arrested Development, 3 years, 5 months, and 2 days in the life of, which I did have to look up. I did not remember the name of that album because it was just the Mr. Wendell album. And that was the track I probably replayed. I don't remember many of the others, but I did have the entire album. But don't anymore for some reason. Man, 1992, I don't know what happened. The second was 1 year later, the second of the two that somebody might have guessed and immediately preceded Unknown Road, was just a single. I didn't have the album for this one, and was one that if my mom had continued to listen to my cassettes, she might have taken away from me, I'm pretty sure, because it was Cypress Hill's Insane in the Brain. And I don't remember much about it. I just remember liking it a great deal. I think me and Brandon were on the same wavelength here. And that's when Unknown Road came shortly afterwards. But I can still see myself in that car with that group of kids going down H Street in Lompoc, California, turning left onto North. We were probably going to Brandon's house. And Charlie Myers, one of my older friends, same friend that would eventually take me to my first concert face-to-face in '95. So short 2 years between first punk album and first punk concert. But he hands me, we were probably listening to Unknown Road at the time, and I was like, who is this? Because it also, punk music seemed pretty, I didn't know it from like Metallica or anything. It just seemed like heavy guitar music, which was also something that was like, can I listen to this? Is that okay? And I didn't say that out loud, but I can see him handing me that album and it being the next thing I did buy at Warehouse. And I do remember that, actually. I do remember going down and getting that album now that I think about it. So that's the story behind the new thing on the wall, Pennywise Unknown Road, my first punk album, and the albums that led up to it. Although, I don't know if you could say that Def Leppard Hysteria, MC Hammer, Please Hammer, Don't Hurt Them, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or Arrested Development and Cypress Hill really had much to do with listening to punk rock music at all. It was skateboarding. It all goes back to skateboarding. In fact, I'll tell you what happened. My mom bought me a pair of baggy pants from Miller's Outpost in 6th grade, I believe, in middle school. And so the skateboarders saw the other baggy pants person, which, by the way, the skateboarders were the first to do the baggy pants, by the way. We all know this. This isn't, I don't know if that's just regionally true. I was not up on the fashions at the time, in fact, but skaters were the first. So they saw other baggy pants person and adopted me, which led to me actually buying a skateboard, which led to me hanging out with the people that listen to punk rock music. Although punk rock music, long storied history with skateboarding, there were also some skateboarders, I think newly at the time, that listened to rap and hip hop and oldies, actually. There was a streak of oldies, I feel like, that went around the skateboarding crowd. Listened to some Beatles and whatnot. Still do. So there you go. That's all I got this time. I am leaving right now-ish to go to Hollywood, try and hit it big. No, I'm going to go see 7 Seconds, which I haven't seen in over a decade, and the Bouncing Souls, which I haven't seen in... Have I seen them since... This might be the first time since COVID, right? Not that I saw them during COVID, but since nobody saw anybody during COVID. Yeah, I think it is. Anyway, thank you for hanging out, always, and forever, which isn't a reference to any movie at all.